February 25, 1991. 2100 hours, Iraqi Republican Guard command post, 60 kilometers southwest of Basra. Major Mohammed leaned against the sandbag wall of his command bunker, studying the American positions through Soviet-made binoculars. Around him, the 18th Armored Brigade of the Tawakkalna Division, Saddam Hussein's elite, had transformed an old training ground into a fortress. 40 T-72 tanks dug into hull-down positions, 16 BMP fighting vehicles positioned behind berms, hundreds of infantry in trenches between the armor. Mohammed was no fool. Fort Benning graduate, infantry officer advanced course, class of 1984. He'd studied at the Americans' own schools, learned their doctrine, understood their thinking. 8 years of combat experience against Iran had taught him how to kill armor. "They will come along the road," he told his staff, pointing at the map. "No navigation equipment for featureless desert. They will follow the road through the village, and we will destroy them in the kill zone." The defense was textbook Soviet doctrine: reverse slope positions exploiting the imperceptible ridge, engagement areas north and south designed to create killing fields, minefields to channel the Americans into his guns, reserve of 18 T-72 tanks positioned 3,000 meters east. "American tanks are heavy," Mohammed said, lighting a cigarette. 60, maybe 70 tons, parade ground vehicles built for show, good for CNN cameras. When they close to fighting range, V-500, maybe 2,000 meters, we kill them as we killed the Iranians. His staff officers nodded. They'd all heard the intelligence briefings. American M1 Abrams tanks, powerful but fuel-hungry. Thick armor, but poor mobility. Sophisticated electronics, but untested in real combat. What Major Mohammed didn't know, what no Iraqi commander understood, was that the war was already over. He just hadn't died yet. If you're learning something new about the hidden technological edge that won the Gulf War, hit that like button. And if you've got knowledge about Desert Storm, whether you served, studied it, or have family who were there, drop it in the comments. This story gets deeper the more perspectives we add. Now let's see how the most lopsided tank battle in modern history actually unfolded. The Republican Guard believed they were invincible. History had taught them this lesson through blood and victory. Formed in 1969 as Saddam Hussein's personal protection force, the Republican Guard had evolved into Iraq's premier military formation. During the brutal 8-year war with Iran, the Guard had stopped human wave attacks that sacrificed tens of thousands. They'd held Basra. They'd counterattacked at Fish Lake and recaptured Al-Faw Peninsula. By 1991, the Republican Guard consisted of 8 divisions, over 100,000 men equipped with Iraq's best tanks, artillery, and armored vehicles. The Tawakkalna Mechanized Division, the Medina Armored Division, the Hammurabi Armored Division, names that struck fear across the Middle East. Their primary weapon was the T-72 main battle tank. The Iraqi export versions, nicknamed Asad Babil, Lion of Babylon, represented what Saddam's generals believed was the pinnacle of armored warfare. The T-72 specifications impressed on paper: 125mm smoothbore main gun, V-84 diesel engine producing 780 horsepower, composite armor combining steel and ceramic materials, low profile making it harder to hit, proven combat record from Syria to Angola. Iraqi tank commanders had trained on Soviet doctrine that emphasized mass, momentum, and firepower, overwhelmed the enemy through superior numbers. The doctrine had worked against Iran. It would work against America. "The Americans have never faced real tank combat," Colonel Hassan al-Majid told his brigade commanders on February 20th. "They fought Germany 50 years ago. They fought Vietnam in jungles where tanks couldn't operate. This will be their education." Iraqi intelligence had compiled detailed assessments of American capabilities. They knew the M1 Abrams weighed nearly 70 tons, a logistical nightmare. They knew it burned jet fuel at prodigious rates. A vulnerability. They knew it cost over $4 million per unit, an economic weakness. What Iraqi intelligence didn't know was that American engineers had spent the entire Cold War preparing to fight the Soviet Union's best tanks. Every design decision, every technological investment, every training exercise had focused on one mission: destroy Soviet armor before it destroys you. The Abrams wasn't designed for show, it was designed to kill T-72s. On February 24, 1991, Operation Desert Sabre began. Coalition forces executed General Schwarzkopf's left hook maneuver, while Iraqi forces oriented toward Kuwait's coastline, expecting amphibious assault. American armor poured across the lightly defended Saudi-Iraqi border to the west. The U.S. 7 Corps led the attack, over 1,500 M1A1 Abrams tanks, supported by thousands of Bradley fighting vehicles. The 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment screened ahead, tasked with locating Republican Guard positions. Major Muhammad's 18th Armored Brigade detected American movement on February 25th evening. Division headquarters ordered him to hold position and delay the Americans. Finally, Muhammad said, "They come to us. Perfect." He walked through his defensive positions that evening. Young men from Baghdad and Basra, from Tikrit and Mosul, veterans of the Iranian meat grinder. "Remember your training," Muhammad told them. "Let them come close. Fire at 500 meters. Aim for the engine compartment or track assemblies. Kill the tracks. Kill the tank." The crews checked their ammunition loads. Each T-72 carried 39 rounds, armor-piercing, high-explosive anti-tank, and fragmentation shells, enough to destroy a company of American armor if they could get in range. What the Iraqi gunners didn't know was that getting in range would be their death sentence. The Soviet TPD-K1 optical sight, equipped on the T-72, required clear line of sight. The gunner looked through the eyepiece, manually tracking targets. Effective range against moving targets, 1,800 meters on a clear day. Less in dust or darkness. The Iraqis had some night vision equipment, first-generation active infrared systems requiring IR spotlights, essentially announcing your position. A handful had passive starlight scopes, but these were useless in sandstorms. American tankers trained with equipment the Iraqis couldn't imagine. The ANVSG-2 tank thermal sight didn't rely on visible light. It detected infrared radiation, heat signatures, hot engines, human bodies, even disturbed sand, all visible to thermal imaging. American tanks could fight in total darkness, through sandstorms, through smoke. Conditions that rendered Iraqi tanks blind left American gunners with crystal-clear targeting. The fire control computer was equally revolutionary. The M1A1's ballistic computer factored barrel wear, ammunition type, wind, temperature, range, target movement into firing solutions calculated in milliseconds. First-round hit probability at 2,000 meters, over 90% for the Abrams versus roughly 30% for the T-72. But the most decisive advantage was range. The M256 120mm smoothbore cannon, firing M829A1 silver bullet, depleted uranium ammunition, could destroy any Soviet export tank at ranges exceeding 3,500 meters. Confirmed kills in Desert Storm were recorded at over 4,000 meters. Iraqi T-72s could barely see targets at that distance, much less hit them. This wasn't a fair fight. It was a technological execution. February 26, 1991. 16:07 hours. Grid coordinate 73 easting. Captain H.R. McMaster's M1A1 Abrams pushed through blowing sand that reduced visibility to hundreds of meters. Eagle Troop, 9 Abrams tanks and 12 M3 Bradley fighting vehicles, advanced in combat formation. McMaster, 20 years old, commanded 140 soldiers equipped with the most advanced armored vehicles ever fielded. Each M1A1 represented a $4.3 million investment. Each crew had undergone months of intensive training at the National Training Center. "All Eagle elements, this is Eagle 6, McMaster radioed. Continue movement to 70 easting. The Abrams AGT 1500 gas turbine engine, 1,500 horsepower, propelled the 67-ton tank across the desert at 35 kilometers. Inside, the crew maintained constant communication. What they didn't know was that they were entering Major Muhammad's carefully prepared defensive position. At 16:07 hours, Staff Sergeant John McReynolds' Bradley drove directly over an Iraqi observation bunker. 2 enemy soldiers emerged, hands raised. McReynolds detained them and moved them rearward. His wingman took fire from the village. As Sergeant Maurice Harris engaged with his 25mm Bushmaster cannon, First Lieutenant Tim Gauthier fired a Tau missile into the buildings. McMaster's gunner, Staff Sergeant Craig Koch, fired a USO high-explosive round to mark the target. All 9 Abrams unleashed a barrage that transformed the village into fire and shattered concrete. As the dust cleared, McMaster's tank crested an imperceptible rise north of the village. "Tanks direct front," Koch reported. Through his cupola, McMaster saw them, 8 T-72 tanks in prepared positions roughly 1,000 meters away, hull down behind berms. There was one critical problem with Mohammed's perfect defense. The Iraqi tanks were pointed the wrong direction. Mohammed had positioned his armor to engage targets approaching along the road. He'd assumed American forces would need roads to navigate through featureless desert. He hadn't known about GPS. The global positioning system allowed American forces to navigate with precision anywhere on Earth. Each M1A1 knew its exact position. No roads required. Eagle Troop wasn't on the road. They were 500 meters north of it. Mohammed's tanks were oriented 25-30 degrees off-axis. "Identified," Koch reported. Eye pressed to the thermal sight. Through the viewfinder, the Iraqi T-72s glowed white-hot against cool desert sand. The diesel engines at operating temperature blazed like stars. "Fire!" McMaster ordered. The M256 cannon recoiled. The depleted uranium penetrator, a 10-pound dart, screamed downrange at 1,575 meters per second. 3 seconds later, the round struck the lead T-72's turret. Depleted uranium is 1.7 times denser than lead. At hypersonic velocity, the kinetic energy liquefies both penetrator and armor at impact. The DU round doesn't just punch through, it creates a jet of superheated metal spraying into the crew compartment. The T-72's crew had no chance. The penetrator pierced the turret, ignited the ammunition carousel, and transformed the vehicle into a fireball. The turret, weighing several tons, launched skyward. It spun 40 feet into the air before crashing 30 meters away. Koch's second round hit another T-72. Same result. Penetration, ammunition detonation, turret toss. By the time Iraqi gunners realized they were under attack, 3 of their 8 tanks were gone. Elapsed time, 10 seconds. The surviving T-72 crews tried to back out of fighting positions to reorient. The maneuver was dictated by their defensive deployment. It was too late. The other 8 Abrams opened fire. The battlefield erupted. Iraqi tanks that had taken hours to position were destroyed in seconds. Crews that had trained for years died without ever acquiring their killers. The thermal sights that gave American gunners perfect vision rendered them invisible to Iraqi optics. Iraqi gunners, squinting through conventional sights, saw only haze. All 8 T-72s were destroyed in 90 seconds. "Continue the attack," McMaster ordered. Eagle Troop pushed through the village, through a minefield that scraped the Abrams' belly armor without penetrating, through small arms fire that bounced off like rain. Inside his command bunker, Major Mohammed finally understood something was terribly wrong. Radio reports flooded in, confused, panicked. "Contact front! We are engaged! They are firing from—" Static. A soldier burst into Mohammed's bunker, eyes wide. "Tanks! Tanks!" Mohammed rushed to his observation post. What he saw defied everything he knew. The entire western defensive belt, 40 tanks, 16 BMPs, fortified infantry positions, was burning, not damaged, annihilated. Black smoke pillared from dozens of funeral pyres. He grabbed his radio. "Reserve force, establish defensive line." 3,000 meters east, his reserve of 18 T-72 tanks received the order. Crews scrambled into vehicles, starting engines. At 16:30 hours, McMaster's Abrams crested the low ridge concealing Mohammed's reserve. Through his thermal sight, Koch saw them immediately. 18 tanks, some moving, some stationary. Range, 2,800 meters. At that distance, in fading daylight and blowing dust, Iraqi gunners saw nothing. Their optical sights couldn't acquire targets through haze. Their tanks were designed to fight at 2,500 to 2,000 meters. "Sabot tank!" Koch called out. "Identified!" "Fire!" The first silver bullet struck a T-72 exiting the assembly area. The penetrator punched through frontal armor and continued through the fighting compartment. The ammunition carousel exploded. Another turret launched skyward. The Bradleys joined the massacre. Their BGM-71 tow missiles tracked unerringly to targets. Each missile carried a 13-pound shaped charge warhead designed to kill armor. Iraqi tanks that survived tried desperately to return fire. A few got shots off and bounced off. The M1A1's composite armor, incorporating steel-encased depleted uranium mesh, was designed to defeat Soviet tank rounds. Iraqi gunners watched in horror as their best ammunition sparked harmlessly off Abrams armor or deflected into sand. One Iraqi round struck McMaster's tank directly on the frontal plate. The impact rang through the hull. The crew felt the shock. Then, nothing. The armor held. "We're hit," someone called. "We're fine," McMaster replied. "Keep firing." For 23 minutes, Eagle Troop methodically destroyed Mohammed's brigade. Final count, 50-plus T-72 tanks destroyed, 25-plus armored personnel carriers destroyed, 30-plus trucks destroyed, 400-plus Iraqi soldiers killed, American casualties, 0 tanks destroyed, 0 killed, minor damage to 1 Abrams from a mine that scratched the belly armor. A captured Iraqi lieutenant stared at the Abrams rolling past. An American soldier asked through an interpreter, "Did you even see us before we fired?" The lieutenant shook his head. "We saw nothing, only death." The Battle of 73, Easting was just the beginning. The Battle of Medina Ridge, on February 27th, saw the 1st Armored Division destroy 186 Iraqi tanks in 2 hours. The Battle of Norfolk became a nocturnal massacre as American thermal sights turned darkness into an execution chamber. The mathematics were brutal. American M1A1 tanks engaged Iraqi armor at 2,000 to 3,000 meters. Iraqi tanks couldn't effectively fight back until 2,000 meters or less. By the time Iraqi gunners got in range, they were already dead. Captured Republican Guard tank commander Captain Khalid al-Tikriti told his interrogators, "We were told you had good tanks. We were not told you had magic. My gunner fired at one of your tanks from 1,000 meters, direct hit on the front. The round exploded. Your tank kept coming. It fired once. My tank exploded. This is not warfare. This is sorcery." There was no sorcery, just engineering. The M1A1's frontal armor provided protection equivalent to 600 mm against kinetic penetrators and 700 mm against shaped charges. Iraqi T-72s couldn't penetrate at any practical range. American DU ammunition could penetrate over 700 meters at 2,000 meters. Against Iraqi T-72s with frontal protection of roughly 500 meters, the silver bullet rounds were unstoppable. But the Abrams' superiority went beyond armor and ammunition. The American training pipeline produced better crews. Every M1A1 crew had completed months of training before deploying. They'd fired thousands of rounds on ranges. They'd fought mock battles at the National Training Center against OPFOR units trained to replicate Soviet tactics. Iraqi crews suffered from limited ammunition allocations, reduced training after the Iran-Iraq War, and a command culture valuing loyalty over competence. The industrial disparity was equally stark. The United States deployed nearly 2,000 M1A1 Abrams, backed by unlimited spare parts, ammunition, and fuel. General Dynamics' Lima tank plant could produce 60 tanks per month. Iraq entered the war with approximately 5,500 tanks total. After a decade of war and sanctions, spare parts were scarce. Every tank destroyed was essentially irreplaceable. Major Mohammed survived the Battle of 73 Easting. Interviewed days later, he provided testimony historians would study for decades. "I graduated from your infantry officer advanced course at Fort Benning. I studied your tactics. I knew your doctrine, but I never imagined the technology gap was so wide. My tanks couldn't see yours until too late. My rounds couldn't penetrate your armor. Your rounds destroyed my vehicles from distances I thought impossible. You destroyed us in 23 minutes, not defeated. Destroyed. You didn't just beat us, you made us irrelevant." His words captured the essential truth. Technological overmatch had transformed armored warfare into something resembling a video game more than traditional combat. When the ceasefire took effect on February 28, 1991, 100 hours after the ground war began, the statistics told a story of absolute dominance. Coalition tank losses, 31 total. Of these, 0 M1A1 Abrams were destroyed by Iraqi fire. 7 Abrams were destroyed by friendly fire. 2 were intentionally destroyed by American forces to prevent capture after immobilization. Iraqi tank losses. Approximately 3,300 destroyed. The Republican Guard was effectively annihilated. Entire divisions ceased to exist. Kill ratio over 100.1, but statistics don't capture the human dimension. Colonel Hassan al-Rawi, captured Iraqi brigade commander, provided haunting testimony. I commanded T-72s against Iran for 6 years. I knew armor warfare. I understood combined arms operations. I thought Desert Storm would be similar. Instead, we faced something I had no framework to understand. Your tanks appeared from nowhere. They killed us at ranges we couldn't believe. 3 kilometers, 4 kilometers, through sandstorms, in darkness. I lost 86 tanks in 4 hours. Do you understand? Each tank had 4 men I knew personally, all gone. And your forces? We captured no American tanks. We destroyed no American tanks. We barely scratched your paint. My men were brave. They wanted to fight. And they died without ever seeing the enemy that killed them. It was systematic extermination. A captured Republican Guard officer was more direct. We called your tanks metal ghosts. They appeared, killed, and vanished. Our rounds that hit them did nothing. Their rounds that hit us killed everything. How do you fight an enemy that sees in the dark, that sees through smoke? You can't. You die. The psychological impact on Iraqi forces was devastating. Entire units abandoned vehicles and fled. Thousands surrendered at first sight of American armor. American tankers experienced a different war. Sergeant David Rodriguez, gunner with the 1st Armored Division. My first engagement, I saw 3 T-72s through the thermal sight. Range, 2,800 meters. First shot, first kill. Turret went flying. Second shot, second kill. The 3rd tank managed to fire at us. Round went wide. My 3rd shot hit center mass. 3 tanks in 30 seconds. The thing that struck me was how one-sided it was. The Iraqis were brave, but they were fighting with equipment 20 years behind ours. Staff Sergeant Marcus Johnson, 3rd Armored Division. You climb into that tank knowing you're in the most survivable vehicle on the battlefield. We took hits. I personally watched an Iraqi round strike our frontal armor. Big impact, huge noise, then nothing. The armor held. We kept fighting. The Abrams is an absolute beast. The few instances where Iraqi forces disabled American vehicles revealed more about resilience than vulnerability. One M1A1 struck by multiple RPG-7 rockets to the rear suffered an engine fire. The crew evacuated safely. The Helon fire suppression system activated. The tank was recovered and back in service within days. Another Abrams ran over an anti-tank mine. The crew reported a loud bang. The tank continued its mission. Inspection revealed scoring on bottom armor, but no penetration. The Abrams' survivability features, blowout panels for ammunition storage, armored bulkheads, sophisticated fire suppression, saved American lives repeatedly. Desert Storm's tank engagements carried strategic implications that echoed for decades. The Soviet Union, watching their export tanks annihilated, accelerated modernization programs and realized they couldn't compete economically. The catastrophic performance contributed to psychological factors leading to the USSR's dissolution. For the United States, the victory validated 30 years of Cold War investment. The Abrams, Bradley, Apache, GPS systems designed to fight World War III proved devastatingly effective. The Gulf War established American military dominance that persisted through the 1990s and beyond. Potential adversaries understood, don't fight American armor in open terrain with conventional forces. But in February 1991, for 100 hours, tank warfare was still relevant, and the M1A1 Abrams proved to be the most dominant armored vehicle in history. The mocking laughter of Saddam's generals died in the smoke of burning T-72s, their confident predictions transformed into desperate radio calls for help that never came. Their elite Republican Guard divisions were systematically destroyed by an enemy that fought by rules they didn't understand, with technology they couldn't match. Major Mohammed survived. Many of his men didn't. The 18th Armored Brigade ceased to exist. The Tawakkalna Division was disbanded due to losses. In the quiet hours after ceasefire, Iraqi soldiers walked among wreckage. Burned-out T-72s stretched across the desert for miles. Turrets lay scattered like discarded toys. An Iraqi sergeant, interviewed weeks later, struggled to articulate what he'd witnessed. "We thought we were soldiers fighting a war. But when I saw the American tanks, untouched, undamaged, rolling through our positions like we weren't even there, I understood. We weren't soldiers. We were targets in an execution. They came through our lines untouched because we never touched them. We couldn't." The fundamental lesson was brutal. Technological superiority wins wars. When one side has thermal sights and the other has optical scopes, when one side can kill at 3,500 meters and the other at 2,000 meters, when one side's armor stops everything and the other stops nothing, courage becomes irrelevant. The American military had spent the Cold War obsessed with technological edge. Desert Storm validated that obsession. Quality over quantity wasn't just doctrine, it was demonstrated fact. For Iraq, the lesson came too late. Saddam Hussein had invested billions in Soviet equipment. He'd mocked American parade ground soldiers. His generals had laughed at intelligence reports about American capabilities. The laughter stopped on February 26, 1991, when thermal sights rendered darkness transparent and depleted uranium rounds rendered courage obsolete. The M1A1 Abrams remains in service today. Upgraded variants incorporate even more advanced technology, digital networks, active protection systems, improved armor, enhanced sensors. The T-72s that survived were sold for scrap, converted into monuments, or stored as testament to obsolescence. The Battle of 73 Easting has been studied by military academies worldwide. Captain H.R. McMaster eventually rose to lieutenant general and served as national security advisor. His 23-minute masterpiece is taught at West Point. Saddam's generals mocked the Abrams as heavy, slow parade ground vehicles. They were wrong about everything except the weight. The M1A1 is heavy because survivability requires armor. It carries sophisticated equipment because lethality requires technology. It costs millions because excellence isn't cheap. And it rolled through Iraqi lines untouched because American engineering, training, logistics, and doctrine created an armored fighting vehicle without equal. The mock laughter turned to screams. The screams turned to silence. The silence was broken only by the rumble of 67-ton Abrams tanks rolling north toward total victory, untouched by enemy fire, unstoppable by enemy forces, unforgettable for everyone who witnessed it. The last great tank battle of the 20th century taught a lesson that echoes into the 21st. In modern warfare, the system matters, the technology matters, the training matters, the industrial base matters, and in 1991, America had the best of all four. Saddam's generals stopped mocking when they understood this truth. But by then, their tanks were burning, their soldiers were fleeing, and their war was lost. The Abrams had rolled through their lines untouched, proving that in the age of thermal sights and depleted uranium ammunition, you need technology to see the enemy, armor to survive their fire, and guns to kill them first. America had all three. Iraq had none. The result was never in doubt.